Awesome. And I'll just give a quick introduction. So for those who don't know me, my name is Inka. I'm the president of the Marine Society, and Tamsin and Gemma, who you can also see here, are responsible for organizing this wonderful talk today. So we're super excited to introduce Etoile Smulders, a former UA student who is currently doing her master's in fishery science. Etoile will be speaking about her work with Thresher Shark Indonesia, which is a thresher shark conservation project based in Indonesia that finds alternative options for communities whose livelihoods are dependent on shark fishing. Etoile will also be sharing a conservation trip that she is running, where volunteers can participate in the work done in Indonesia and gain some hands-on experience tagging sharks. So the floor is yours, Etoile.
Okay, so hi everyone. So I'm going to do this talk on behalf of the Thresher Shark Indonesia team, which I have been fortunate enough to be a part of for the past few years. This talk is going to be broken up in two sections. The first part, I'm just going to talk about the project, what we do and our work in Indonesia. And then the second part, I'm going to be talking about the Conservation Experience Program, which is a volunteer experience program that we'll be running at the end of June and July. So if you guys are interested in learning about that, then you can stay for the second part of the presentation, or if you just want to learn about the project, then stay in the first part. After the first part, I'll be answering the questions. I'll be answering questions after the first part, and then we can go on for those of you interested in learning about the volunteer opportunity. Okay, so this is just our team. This is a snapshot of our team. We actually have a lot of other people around the world and advisors who have been helping us. Most of the people are on the ground in Etoile, and there's a lot of us like me who's been away from Indonesia for 2 years due to COVID restrictions, but still a lot of work to do and contribute remotely. Okay, so and if I'm speaking too fast, please just let me know because I tend to speak very fast. Okay, so for context, so Indonesia is the world's largest shark fishing nation. They are the biggest exporter for shark and ray products worldwide, and this has been since around 2010. Indonesia is huge. It is so wide. It is so geographically and culturally diverse. It should be managed in like 10 different countries, but it is one country. And that provides some obstacles with regards to fishery management and policies put in place in order to maintain sustainable fisheries, just because one central control government can't really influence directly the entire nation just because it's so spread out and diverse. Anyways, the majority of sharks caught in Indonesia are caught commercially in bycatch fisheries, such as long lining operations. This is typically tuna fisheries for yellowfin tuna, big-eyed tuna, bluefin tuna also. But there's also a big presence of small-scale shark fishing communities around the country who fish sharks solely for subsistence reasons and on a very small scale. And in many parts of the country, sharks are actually a vital livelihood aspect for these coastal communities, and these communities depend on this small-scale shark fishing. So Indonesia is part of a bunch of international fishery management organizations like the IOTC, which manages the tuna fisheries along with other nations in the world, and they're also assignee to CITES. So they are obliged to implement protection regulations for CITES restricted species and protected species like whale sharks and thresher sharks and manta rays and stuff like that. So the government actually has a whole bunch of national protection regulations put in place for protection of certain marine species. But the issue is that these regulations are targeted towards more large-scale commercial fishing operations. And it's very hard for like the small-scale subsistence fisheries to adopt these laws and listen to these laws because they're a completely different environment and culture and different type of fishery. So these blanket regulations that are put in place to protect certain species around the country aren't really adopted at a local level, which is why a lot of these small scale shark fishing, subsistence fisheries, even for protected species internationally and protected species within Indonesia, still exist. There's also like a decentralized fishery government system, which puts more of a challenge on trying to make all the laws, the fisheries laws, uniform within the country. Okay, so thresher shark. So there are 3 species of thresher sharks. You have the pelagic thresher shark, which is the one that we have in Indonesia, and it's the smallest one. And then we also have the common thresher shark and the big eye thresher shark, which are more temperate and cold water species. You get them in New Zealand, but not so much in Indonesia. Thresher sharks are actually one of the most commonly landed shark species in the country from commercial tuna fisheries, both purse seining and longlining, and they are listed as a IUCN endangered species, so their conservation status is very important. There has been a big decline in the catch of thresher sharks in the past 10 years in Indonesia, and unfortunately there's very limited population data on the species, so it's very hard to get a good idea of the health of the population. Just a fun fact, in Indonesia, they're called hiu tikus, which automatically directly translates to mouse sharks. So yeah, they are a very key species in fisheries in Indonesia, and their conservation status is a big priority in the country and worldwide. So for context, this on the side here is the whole map of Indonesia, and this little red area, this is in the province of East Nusa Tenggara. This is Alor, so this is where Thresher Shark Project is based, and this is where a targeted thresher shark fishery, subsistence thresher shark fishery exists. I don't know if you guys know, or if you can see my mouse, but this little, where my mouse is, that's Bali. So if you know Indonesia, it's a little bit on the east side. It's a pretty remote area. It's very beautiful. It's part of the Coral Triangle, so top, like, most diverse marine biodiversity in the world. So yeah, that's the context. That is where we are based, and that is where the fishery we are is focused on. So in Alor, there is a marine protected area, and this was established in 2015, obviously because it's part of the Coral Triangle, and the Indonesian government realizes the potential that this has for tourism and economic benefits and conserving marine biodiversity. So they established this MPA in 2015, but unfortunately, there's a lot of issues with inappropriate MPA development. And then because of that, there's a lot of obstacles on why people don't adhere to the rules of the marine protected area. And this has a lot to do with socioeconomic status and like cultural identity to fisheries. So yeah. It is a MPA, but despite that, there has been a thriving thresher shark fishery there from the local villages for quite some time. So the thresher sharks in Alor, there's 2 main villages, Lewalu and Ampera villages, and they have been catching thresher sharks for about 50 years. They don't have any cultural significance or like traditional significance to this art of fishing. They just catch the thresher sharks when it becomes an opportunity for them. So it's not like part of their culture or they're like traditional shark fishers. They've just found themselves in a position that where they go to fish during a certain time of year is also the time of year where thresher sharks migrate into the marine protected area to give birth. And on the way in, they obviously come in contact with the thresher shark fishermen and they get caught. So it's actually pretty interesting how they get caught. So I mean, you can see from the photos, it's all pretty basic fishing artisanal style. The fishermen use hand lines, and they use chicken feathers and little like ruffles as their lures. And the thresher sharks come in and they think the lure is like prey. So they zoom in and then they whip it with a tail, and they actually get entangled on the hook within their tail. So when the fishermen pull the shark up, it's from the tail and not from the mouth, which I thought was pretty interesting when I started working with this project. So yeah, so fisher and catch surveys, it's about 300 thresher sharks landed per year. And the majority of these thresher sharks landed from these 2 shark fishing villages are actually pregnant females. It's over 82% of the catch is pregnant females. Now, there's been no identification, excuse me, of pelagic thresher shark breeding grounds in the whole world. So the fact that majority of these sharks are pregnant is a very important aspect of the project, and just highlights how important it is to conserve these species and this area in the future. Thresher sharks are super slow maturing, and they have a low fecundity rate, small amount of babies. So yeah, they're super vulnerable to overfishing and exploitation. So pretty critical to put an end to this fishery and conserve this breeding ground for the species. Oh, yeah, so this is just some photos. So this is actually quite an emotional photo. This is a bunch of children from one of the villages, and the fishermen came back to the village and they had caught a pregnant female, and they cut the female open, and there was like 6 little babies, and they're all alive because they were just about to be born. And the children took all the baby sharks and they tried to release them into the water so they could survive and grow up to be big sharks, but obviously they didn't. But yeah, it just shows, I mean, children care. Yes, this is some more photos of some of the sharks that are landed. Yep, happens, well, it used to happen all the time. Pretty sad. Yeah, so this is just some images of the type of lures that they would use in the fishing technology that they would use to catch a shark. So like I said, it's super basic. The fishery isn't like, they're not going out there targeting thresher sharks to cut the fins off to sell to shark fin middlemen traders, to go to the big cities, to export to China to make a bunch of money. Like, that's not what they do. They literally catch the thresher sharks during a certain time of year when they're not able to catch other more valuable species like yellowfin tuna and snapper. And they just retain the catch because it has value to them and they use it, but they're not greedy for it. If you kind of understand what I'm saying, they're just like opportunist shark fishers. So they'll go out there, catch the thresher sharks, has value, we'll keep it, but they're not going to go out there and all day, every day to catch as many as they can, just to sell the fins and make a lot of money, which is different to a few other shark fishery locations in Indonesia. But the fact that the majority of the sharks that they do catch are pregnant females means that even if they don't catch, well, they do catch a lot, it has a big impact on the conservation of their population. Yeah, so pretty much just want to highlight the fact that the fishermen think that tuna, well, the fishermen prefer to catch tuna and snapper, but they have limited fishery resources, like limited quality of boats and engines, and the layout of the MPA so is that they're restricted to fish in a certain area because of currents, and it just happens to be that that's the area where the thresher sharks come in and then they interact. And yeah, opportunist shark fishers, that's a good way to put it. So I just have a little video, I think it's about 2 minutes, that you guys can watch a little bit about the project.
Dan dia makan itu pakai air pasang surut. Dia air surut itu dia makan. Satu hiu itu ya banyak orang makan lah. Dia lari ya
kita bisa bikin pesta juga bisa itu.
Jadi cara mancingnya begitu saja Pak, tidak terlalu ini untuk kebutuhan keluarga menyekolahkan anak.
Satu ekor kita jual itu 400 satu ekor.
Ini dia pakai air panas. Dia pakai air panas dulu, dia rendam dengan air panas. Nanti kulit hitam itu sudah kasih buang. Itu bilang obat besar itu.
Anyways, there's actually I think it's about a 15-minute documentary, the full documentary on YouTube, and I have the link here, or I can send it to anyone if they want to watch the full video. But pretty much the key points to acknowledge is that the fishermen target these sharks for subsistence reasons. Like the meat is used to feed their families, and whatever is not eaten is sold to the local market for not very much money, which is used to send their children to school. Like they're not fishing sharks for greed, they're fishing it for livelihood. So they have a strong connection to the species because it provides livelihood value for them during a time of year when they can't access other valuable fish species. Oh, sorry. Alrighty, so income Thresher Shark Indonesia project. So pretty much our organization is a Indonesian organization started by local Indonesian conservationists, and we are on a mission to conserve the thresher sharks of Alor East Nusa Tenggara, which is the province where this is all happening, by providing policy recommendations through the studies of satellite and acoustic tagging technology, underwater surveys, as well as providing alternative livelihood solutions for shark-dependent communities in Indonesia. We are also engaged in training indigenous leaders in the region in conservation work so that they can take over when the project leaves the area. And ultimately, what we want to do is develop long-term solutions that protect endangered shark species, as well as respect the rights of local people to livelihoods. So this is quite a big human dimensions aspect in conservation, marine conservation work in third world countries like Indonesia. There's often a trade-off that needs to be acknowledged between sacrificing people's livelihoods and the conservation goals you want to achieve. So it's a balance that you really need to try and achieve, and it takes a while to get there. Okay, so this is Thresher Shark Indonesia. This is what we do. These are some of our approaches towards handling the situation. The first thing we do is scientific research. So we're engaged in thresher shark tagging studies. The team have tagged about 15 thresher shark individuals in the Alor marine protected area using satellite and acoustic tagging. And throughout the past few years, we've been tracking these sharks in order to gain data so we can identify critical habitat and use this data to influence the local government to implement better protection policies for the species. We also are engaged in heavy socioeconomic research and with the shark fishing communities, and it's taken a while for the project and the team on the ground to gain the trust of the shark fishing communities so that they understand that we are on their side and we want to help them. When we first started working with them, they automatically thought that restricting their abilities to target thresher sharks would negatively impact their livelihoods. They didn't understand the potential value in conserving the species. So we've been working with them for a few years and trying to come up with alternative income solutions so that they don't have to rely on fishing thresher sharks as a form of income. We are also engaged in a bunch of education and outreach programs with the local communities and their surrounding villages, just to inform people on the importance of conserving this type of biodiversity. And yeah, I mean, if you have a good managed MPA and a thriving marine resources, all stakeholders in the area should benefit. And then we also are actively involved in advocacy and policy with the local and regional government to implement better laws and protection regulations for thresher shark protection in Etoile. So this is just some basic thresher shark catch data that we've done from fishing surveys with the communities. So pretty much, like I said, 82% of the sharks that are caught by the two villages are pregnant. This is very, very important. Yeah. Yeah, so like I said before, they are a slow maturing species, so it's very critical to protect like the pregnant individuals in order to maintain population growth in the future for the species. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we do acoustic and satellite tagging. So this is one of the first activities that the project was engaged in when we started to interact with this fishery in Etoile. Like I said, this research is critical in trying to find critical habitat within the Etoile MPA, as well as the migration of the thresher sharks. So we know where is key areas to implement better laws to protect the species. And in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that there's very limited data on thresher sharks in Indonesia. And when the MPA in Etoile was established in 2015, it was almost unknown that there was like a thriving thresher shark population here. So when the zonation of the MPA was put in place, there was no data on the movements of the thresher shark within the area because no one really knew anything about it. So the zonation of the MPA was established with no knowledge of the thresher sharks, which is not ideal because you obviously want the MPA to cover areas, critical habitat areas for vulnerable species like thresher sharks. So yeah, we do two types of tagging. We do the internal acoustic tagging, which is you catch a shark and then you kind of cut into their belly area and you put a little tag in and then you sew it up and then you put acoustic receivers around the water at certain sites which you think that thresher sharks will come by, and every time they come by, it'll hit a ping. So that's super valuable information. And then you also have the mini pat tags, which are applied kind of like a pole spear method. And then every time we catch a shark, we also collect vital data like the length and gender and stuff. And what we've been doing since the beginning of the tagging process is that we've been engaging the thresher shark fishermen in this research activity. So we are using them to take us out to catch the thresher sharks and do all the research, and giving them a little stipend, a financial incentive to participate. So that's been pretty critical. Like, they're a key stakeholder in this whole conservation project. So it's really important to engage them as much as you can in every step of the process, so they feel like their role is appreciated. This is just a photo. This is Sahil, I think that's his name. Yeah, he's one of the thresher shark fishermen, one of the first ones that we were working with. And this is just a photo of him releasing one of the sharks that he helped us catch and that we tagged. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see fishermen engaging in this type of research activity. And they're super keen. They're totally open to alternative income opportunities. They just never really were provided an opportunity. So there's been no like drawback of like, oh, I don't want to engage in this type of work or anything. Like, if we're just fully open and transparent with them, they're super keen to collaborate, which has been amazing. So this is just some of the data from our satellite tagging. In total, we tagged about 15 thresher sharks in the past 2 years. And you can see that they move quite a lot. So they spend a lot of time in the open ocean areas, in the pelagic zones in Indonesia, which makes them particularly vulnerable to be caught in tuna longline fisheries. But you can also see that they are using the allure, which is where they pass through Flores here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. They're using this as a migration corridor, and that is very critical information. Yeah, so they're using it as a migration corridor to go between the two areas where they spend most of their life. And it also seems like that they are using this as a breeding ground. So we do need to do more research on that. Okay, so this is just some more information on some of the acoustic tagging that we've done. This is highlighting the proximity of critical habitat towards where they are targeted by the fishermen. So yeah, you can see from the map, like it's the fishing area, and where they are most detected through our acoustic tags is pretty close, which is not ideal, but that's why it is super important to engage the fishermen in this conservation project, because we want them to be a part of conserving them for the future, and we want the fishermen to be like custodians for the species. Sorry. Okay, so the socioeconomic situation of the fishermen. We engaged in a lot of interviews and focus groups with them. And in the beginning of the project in 2018, it was pretty clear that they were eager to engage in change. Like I said in the beginning, when I was describing the fishery, they're not culturally or traditionally attached to this fishery. They just are opportunist fishers. So when they catch the thresher sharks, they will utilize it, but they would actually much rather catch more valuable species like yellowfin tuna and red snapper. But they are limited in resources and capabilities to access that fishery in the region. So when we said, oh, we want to help you explore alternative income opportunities, they were pretty keen on engaging with us to get involved in more sustainable fisheries rather than targeting thresher sharks. So in the area, there's a thriving yellowfin population, and there's also a bunch of red snapper and grouper populations outside of the marine protected area, but they are limited to access these resources. A bunch of the fishermen also said that these are particularly the older ones from the villages. They were less keen to engage in fishing in the future, and they'd want to like spend more time at home with their families. So they wanted to develop businesses like maybe an ice business so that they could sell ice to the fishermen who would catch tuna to sell to the market. And then we even had one guy who was keen to leave fishing completely and start a chicken farm. So we're very eager to help him get that established. So yeah, so a key point that I want to highlight in this kind of subsistence small scale fishery situation is that for subsistence-based shark fishing communities like this particular one in Etoile, empowering the locals and drawing a future solution based on their internal drive is critical towards developing a long-term alternative livelihood solutions that minimize their dependency on external help. For example, we don't want to, like the group, the NGO doesn't want to be based in Etoile forever, so that we have to like continually help them throughout their new source of income. You know, like the most sustainable long-term solution is something that they are able to run and do themselves without external help. Like we don't want to cancel shark fishing and replace it with another dependency. Often communities like this, which are super remote, they don't have the skills nor the desire to directly engage in tourism. For example, they don't speak English, they don't really engage with any foreigners or any local tourism. They're super remote. They don't have the etiquette that tourists desire to be with, or the financial literacy or capabilities to deal with that kind of business. You know, they're fishermen at heart. They're born and raised fishing. They love fishing. It's very critical to their identity. So we want to engage them in an alternative income opportunity that really resonates with them. Like we want to support them in doing what they want to do. We don't want to force them to do something they don't really feel comfortable with, and in which they have to like continue relying on external help. So that was pretty key information that we developed after engaging with the community. And it was clear that most of the fishermen, the shark fishermen from both villages, wanted to continue fishing. They just wanted to be a part of a different type of fishery. So after taking this information on board, we help them transition from the thresher shark, from targeting thresher sharks to targeting yellowfin tuna, which are a lot higher value marketable species in the region and within Indonesia. And a lot of people at first were like, oh, this is quite like counterproductive. Like you're giving shark fishermen bigger and better and like more advanced fishing technology. Like, is that really a good idea? But we were confident in supplying the fishermen with these materials because they were really keen on entering a different fishery. Like they knew that yellowfin tuna had more value for them. It was better in the long term, and yeah, they were just super keen. So we had no issues with helping them transition the fishery. So we fundraised through crowdfunding back in 2020, and we raised enough money to get 5 fishing boats for the fishermen, in which they share amongst all 12 shark fishers. And now they go out and target yellowfin tuna. So what we did also is that we did some critical training with them. We trained them in fishery market access and financial literature so that they could have market access to the incredible quality of tuna that they catch in Etoile and be able to sell it not only like locally to their fish market, but throughout the country. So we pretty much gave them access to a fishery supply chain, which they benefit a lot more economically, which took a lot of training, but pretty good outcome. And then we also did some financial literacy courses and business courses with the other fishermen who weren't interested in continuing fishing, but wanted to do a chicken farm, and the other guy who wanted to sell ice so to the newly transitioned tuna fishermen. So this is just some photos. This is one of the boats that we built, the tuna fishing boats that they now have access to. And then the photo on the left here is actually all these shark fishermen at a ceremony that we set up for them within the villages, involving the local government and all the neighbor villages. And this is where they publicly announce that they will no longer engage in fishing thresher sharks, which was like a very, very rewarding moment for us. So from both villages, there is no one fishing thresher sharks in Etoile anymore, which is awesome. And yeah, and then this photo here, this is one of the shark fishermen and his new poultry farm that we help him set up. And then the photo on the bottom right is a shark fisherman who is giving up his shark fishing lures to one of our field coordinators, Eki, on the ground. Yeah, this is pretty much them publicly announcing that they are fully committed to engaging in the sustainable tuna fishery alternative that we have helped them be a part of, and never fish thresher sharks in Etoile anymore. So what we did also is, because it's not only the direct fishers that would benefit from fishing the thresher sharks, there's a whole like community dependent, well, there was a whole community dependent on this fishery. So the wives and the women of the villages were typically responsible for processing, cutting up, and selling the thresher sharks at the market. And obviously now that they don't have any thresher sharks to sell, the women didn't really have a role. And since the tuna are being sent to a different supply chain rather than just the local market, they don't really have a big responsibility for processing the tuna. So we engaged them in a new fishery supply chain where they make tuna floss out of like certain parts of the tuna that their husbands now catch. And then this is sold within some of the biggest cities in Indonesia now. So Abon Ikan Tuna is like a brand of tuna floss from Etoile. And this is the alternative livelihood opportunity that we provided for the women of the villages after we replaced their dependence on thresher shark fishing. And they've been super stoked and happy to engage in it. We have also been working with a bunch of youth throughout the region of Etoile. There's more than 2 villages. I think there's like, I don't know, there's a lot of villages, but we are training we call them the Thresher Shark Champions. So they're individuals between 18 and 25 years old to be local indigenous conservation leaders in their area. Obviously, we don't want to have our organization to have a permanent presence in the region to inform people on what they can and what they cannot do. Like, education is key for the future generations so that they know the value in conserving their marine life. So yeah, we teach them about the importance of biodiversity conservation. We've been training them in effective plastic and waste management. And also they've been very effective in replanting a lot of mangroves that have been degraded due to pollution and overdevelopment in some part of the coast. The photo below is Rafid, the founder of the project. He's talking to one of the local schools. These kids are much younger than the Thresher Shark champions that we work with, but yeah, just showing a bunch of the outreach that we are involved in. And then we also work directly with the local and regional government. So when the MPA was set up in 2015, there was like very limited information about the benefit of species conservation and what communities could benefit from and how to like properly manage an MPA and all that stuff. So the government was lacking management and resource capabilities in order to effectively manage the marine protected area to its full potential. So with all this new data and information that we are providing them, they are super keen to put new protection policies and regulations in place and highlight Allure as a tourism destination for thresher sharks. Like I said before, they didn't really know there was a population of thresher sharks in the marine protected area, but now we've engaged all the stakeholders, like the shark fishers, the community, the government, the dive shops, and everyone can see the clear benefits on preserving the population of thresher sharks. So we're working on inclusive policy development so that everyone can benefit from this type of conservation work. Yeah, so the goal, I mean, the future would be amazing to have Allure as a thresher shark diving destination. So I know I said before that tourism like wasn't a good option directly as an alternative income solution for the thresher sharks, the thresher shark fishermen. Also in COVID, like obviously there's no tourists for 2 years in places like this. So we don't want to fully rely on the thresher shark fishermen to directly get their new income from tourism. There's been a lot of projects in Indonesia and Southeast Asia in which they've replaced fishing activities with tourism. But then during COVID, obviously there's no tourists. So a lot of those fishing communities just went back to fishing whatever they were fishing before the conservation work. And we saw an issue with that. So yeah, giving them alternative fisheries income solutions was definitely the best option, but it would be cool to have Allure, the whole area, like build a brand as a thresher shark diving destination. The fishers don't have to directly be involved in tourism, but they will benefit from the economic like outspur that tourism will come, that will come with tourism as the marine protected area develops. Yeah, so before we do that, there's still quite a lot of research that needs to go into the dispersal of thresher sharks in the area, and what specific dive sites you're most likely to see thresher sharks. They're quite an elusive shark, so it's still, if you see one underwater on a dive, you're quite lucky. But yeah, we're going to continue our acoustic tagging so that we can gather as much information as possible and use this scientific data as proof to explain to the government, regional and national, as to why this area should be developed as a thresher shark diving tourism destination. This is just some graphs on one of the dive sites in which we put an acoustic receiver. So it's just pretty positive information saying that there's like frequent visits from tagged thresher sharks into these specific dive sites. So there's a lot more research that needs to go into it. We need to put a lot more time, but there's hope. Like, it's looking really good. Yeah, so just basing off Malapascua in the Philippines, it's a famous thresher shark diving destination. They also had a similar situation where there was a cleaning station where pelagic thresher sharks used to visit frequently, and the fishers used to catch them. But obviously tourism has a lot more of a valuable income for the entire community rather than just harvesting the sharks for the fishers. So they developed this whole tourism, like the whole island is based around thresher shark diving tourism. So that is something like we'd like to work toward in the future. Still have quite a way to go, but that's the direction that we're heading in. Yeah, and we have some recommendations for the government on what we'd like to do. We want to have thresher sharks fully protected in the East Nusa Tenggara province and hopefully like nationally all over Indonesia, and then protect the critical habitat and the nursery grounds for pelagic thresher sharks in Alor. And then also have more tourists come into the area through partnerships with the Indonesian government that like build the brand of the area for thresher shark diving destination, but it's also very critical to ensure that there's no mass tourism and that dive tourism needs to be sustainably managed. So what's next for our project? Well, the key point is that there's no more shark fishing in Alor, but there's still quite a lot of work to do. Like I said, we need to do a lot more data collection and research on the movements of the thresher sharks. Also, never-ending opportunities to educate the community and do outreach projects. And yeah, we also, the fishermen are fully engaged in their new businesses, but we are still keeping a presence on the ground there just to monitor the activities and make sure that they are sticking with their pact, that they're not going to fish thresher sharks anymore. And if they have any issues with their new business ventures, we will be able to step in and help them. We don't want them to come across an obstacle and be like, oh my God, this is so hard, I'm just going to go back to fishing thresher sharks. So yeah, we're just keeping a presence there for the time being. We're also using this time to work with the government to implement more policy and protection regulations for the sharks in the marine protected area, and ultimately, like I said, develop Alor into a world-renowned thresher shark diving destination. Yeah, and this is just some of our donors and sponsors that we'd like to thank for all their support in the past few years, and we wouldn't be able to achieve nearly as much as we achieved in the past few years without the support from these groups. Yeah, so this is like the end of the beginning, well, the part of the presentation where I talk about the project. I guess I can take questions now before I move on to the volunteer opportunity, if anyone has any questions.
Awesome, thank you, Etoile. That's all, yeah, amazing work. It's so cool to see marine science actually have a real impact in people's lives. So we've had a couple of questions come through the chat. So Abby asked, why does giving the fishermen new boats help them switch to different fisheries? And how does shifting the fishing pressure from thresher sharks to tuna help the situation, considering that those stocks aren't necessarily doing super well either?
Well, so the yellowfin tuna stocks in that part of Indonesia are doing very, very well. And it's also important to note that the type of fishing that these fishermen are engaged in it's like single species handline target fisheries. Like they literally use a handline wrapped around a plastic bottle. So they catch one fish at a time. Like they're not capable of going out and raping the ocean. So like their impact on a yellowfin tuna fishery, which is thriving in the area, is very minimal. They're not eager to engage in like big whole like industrial fishing. They're just artisanal fishers who love fishing and can see the value in fishing tuna. And there's 12 of them. And if they each catch one tuna a day, it really won't impact the yellowfin tuna stocks in that part of Indonesia negatively. So the reason that they can't access the tuna fishing grounds was because the way that the MPA, well, the way that the geography of the region is set up is that it's like a massive current and bottleneck from like the south and the north parts of Indonesia. So there's like massive currents, and it's super hard to get to the effect, like the productive tuna fishing grounds, which are more offshore with the small boats and the limited capacity that they had before. So they were just fishing within the MPA and in the boundary of the MPA, which is exactly in the path of the migrating pregnant thresher sharks coming in to give birth. So yeah, now we've equipped them with better fishing technology and bigger boats, so they have access to go to those more productive fishing grounds where they can target species like yellowfin tuna, which they're not able to catch inside the marine reserve, and instead just end up catching thresher sharks.
Awesome, cool. Abby, does that answer your question? Yep, I'm going to assume so. There's a couple more in the chat now. So Esther asked, what is the longest a tag has tracked for? And do you have a full annual track?
I think we do 6 months for a tag. I'm not too keyed in on the exact data from the tags, but I'm pretty sure we have like a 6-month period of receiving data from the tags.
And then Harry has asked, does catching thresher sharks by longline have any negative repercussions on the survivability of the sharks?
Can you say that again?
Does catching thresher sharks by longline have any negative repercussions on the survivability of the sharks? So I'm guessing that's capturing them and then releasing them.
So we've had no issues with post-capture mortality with the sharks that we've tagged. It's a pretty, it looks rough, but it's a pretty gentle situation, and there's a lot of care involved when we capture these sharks and the way that we tag them. But yeah, every single one seems to swim off perfectly comfortably and safe afterwards. And we've had every single one that we've tagged, we've had no issues with like post-capture mortality or like unexpected tracking movements. They've just seemed to go back to their life as normal after we've tagged them.
Awesome, cool. I had a quick question about the fishermen when they were catching thresher sharks. Did they sustain any injuries from that fishing practice? Like, did they ever sustain any shark attacks or anything?
Not really. So thresher sharks are like super chilled sharks. They're very, very shy. Their teeth are also like very minuscule. And they do all their attacking with their tails. But the fishermen have said, like, if you get in the water when they're still fighting, they can whip you with the tail, which is, I mean, that'll cause some damage, but they typically stay on the boats. And by the time that they lift them up, they just leave them in the water until they're super tired, and then they can bring them on the boat.
Awesome, cool. Were there any other questions? Either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just ask ahead.
I've got another question. If you can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about like how long has this organization like project been going for?
So it started in 2018. Initial research was done by Rafid and Dewey, who are the founder and co-founder, and the project was initially funded and supported by the Conservation Leadership Program and Conservation International. So it's really new, and it's in the world of like marine conservation, it's pretty ridiculous like what we've been able to accomplish in 4 years, considering like it took us about 2 years to like gain the trust of the shark fishermen and for them to realize like we're on their team and we want to help them have a better life, which doesn't involve fishing thresher sharks. And then from that moment on, transitioning them completely out of thresher shark fishing and getting the government involved and the whole local community, like what we've been able to achieve in 4 years is pretty, yeah, it's ridiculous. It normally takes a lot longer. But yeah, it just shows how eager the whole community and all the stakeholders in the whole region were towards our plans. We just had to take the time to listen to everyone's perspectives and what they felt and what kind of everyone viewed the thresher sharks like they had different values towards them. So we needed to take that into consideration and show that like we appreciate and we respect the value you hold towards these sharks, even though they might be different than our value. Like, let's find something where everyone can benefit together without sacrificing or like disregarding the value that these sharks have towards you as a stakeholder.
Yeah, that's awesome. It reminds me of, have you heard of Project Hugh? I think it's like it's I think Medicine Steward or something, but like they do a similar thing. I think they're also based in Indonesia, but they do a lot of work with like whale sharks and tiger sharks and
yeah,
that kind of thing.
But it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit different. Project Hugh.
Yeah.
I mean, Project Hugh is like once engaged shark fishermen directly in tourism, and then in the past 2 years of COVID, they haven't been able to operate at all. And so have a bunch of other conservation projects, which kind of like highlights how you don't want to replace the dependency of shark fishing with another dependency on like foreign tourism, or like the communities depending on the presence of their organization to have their alternative livelihoods. Like most of our impact and most of the transitions that we've been able to engage with the shark fishermen have happened during COVID, which is pretty awesome. You know, like they are fully empowered to operate these new businesses and livelihoods for themselves without us, which is super critical for long-term sustainability. Like you don't want them to be like, oh, there's no tourists for 2 years, we're just going to go back to shark fishing, which is like what a lot of projects have been dealing with.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Is Thresher Shark Indonesia going to move into other shark fishing communities once they've kind of gone through the whole process with the law?
Yeah, so we're looking at expanding throughout East Nusa Tenggara province to a whole bunch of other shark fishing communities, but with Indonesia, each region and area is very context specific. Like the village will have different needs and they fish sharks for different needs for different reasons. So it's kind of hard to apply like one model that you use exactly to like a different area. Like you kind of need to come up with a whole new conservation management plan, which is pretty much why these blanket regulations that the national government put in place to protect certain species never really work, because everyone's like, they just like blow it over their shoulders, like, oh no, that doesn't work for us. So yeah, it's a lot of work in a place like Indonesia, but it's definitely impactful and worth it, and the rewards are awesome.
Oh yeah, that's so cool. So we've had another question in the chat. Are there any future plans or considerations in place for the case that yellowfin tuna fisheries become critically low?
Not at the moment, no. We're working with a bunch of local tuna fishery organizations that are helping us ensure the sustainability of the fishery and the supply chain that we've got the fishermen involved in. One of them is the IPNLF, so International Pole and Line Foundation. So yeah, it's not really, obviously it might be a consideration in the future, but for the time being, due to the very low impact and pressure that these 12 shark fishermen will have on the fishery that they're now engaged in, it's not really like a looming threat. But we've also been pretty involved with training them, not only just like how to fish different fish, but like how to manage their own business, how to like enter supply chains, financial literacy, and how to manage money, and all this, engage with like other people who are not in the village. So they have all these new skills that they could apply to future business opportunities if that was ever to become an issue.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, any more questions? Otherwise, we might move on to the next part of the talk, and then I'm sure we can have another question session after then.
I have a quick question. Is there a time estimate for when you will no longer have anyone stationed in Etoile?
Not really. Hopefully in the next few years. Obviously, we're trying our best to like get our involvement with the Thresher shark fishers and the villages as like low as possible, but there's a lot of stuff going on in that whole area that needs addressing. So we're going to keep a presence there, but we're very you know, aware that we don't want to create a dependence for whatever project that we are assisting in, that they rely on us. But there's a lot of like, it takes a while for national and regional policies and new laws to get put in place, and also a couple of years, you need a couple of years worth of data collecting to have like anything impactful before you can approach the national government of Indonesia to try and change the law. So it takes a while, but for like hands-on activities on the ground, we've definitely taken a step back from our activities with directly with the shark fishing villages. But yeah, we're pretty like keen to spend like the next few years just working with the youth in the area and all the villages, and training people to become conservation champions themselves so that we could go back to or start working in another area and they can manage the marine protected area and the fisheries and all the stakeholders amongst themselves.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we'll hold it there for now and we'll just continue with the last little part.
Okay, so this next part of the presentation, I'm just going to be talking about our conservation experience program. So if anyone is looking for an incredibly, ridiculously awesome conservation experience program, this is definitely the one to sign up for. I wish something like this was available when I was doing my undergrad. So pretty much from June 27th to July 11th, we are going to be taking on 6 volunteers. And it's a 2-week program where you guys will be directly involved in all the work that we do with the conservation of thresher sharks and the MPA in Etoile, Indonesia. So I'm just going to go through this program and what's going to happen and what you guys will gain and stuff. So not only are you going to have the opportunity to have a bunch of hands-on experience doing thresher shark tagging and community-based conservation work and outreach and everything, but we're going to have a lot of workshops set up to teach you guys about conservation project development and management and how to write grants and proposals and all that stuff. And it literally took me, I don't know, so many years of failing and trying to figure out myself how to do it properly. I wish someone just gave me like an outline and be like, this is what you need to do. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. It'll save you a lot of time in the future if you want to, build a career in marine conservation work. Like you'll gain a lot of very insightful information in this opportunity that we're offering volunteers. So yeah, we're going to be teaching you guys about conservation project design, obviously thresher shark conservation and tagging. You'll also be involved in mangrove, seagrass, and coral conservation alongside the thresher shark champions, the local indigenous leaders that we've been training throughout the past 2 years, community outreach, and also island adventures and cultural experiences and lots of scuba diving. Etoile is at the part of the Coral Triangle. So it's literally the most beautiful place in the world for diving. It's ridiculous. But yeah, so this is just a little bit more information on the type of knowledge and experience you'll gain in the workshops if you decide to come and help us in Etoile. So yeah, we'll be teaching you guys about project proposals, and you'll learn a whole bunch of stuff about coastal marine ecology, specifically to third world countries and the Coral Triangle and Indonesia and tropical marine ecosystems. And then, yeah, you'll get some experience on data collection for reef management, but also like social data collection, quantitative and qualitative, and having this type of experience is very helpful for conservation in the future, human dimensions and understanding human relationship to the ecosystem, and measuring that is a very critical point that can't be overlooked in many conservation projects. So this is just a little information about the shark tagging workshop that we're going to be running. So you'll get a whole bunch of information on the species and learn about pelagic thresher sharks in Etoile and Indonesia and the species in general. And then we're going to take you guys and tag the thresher sharks, which is an incredibly amazing experience. There's no other opportunity in the world where you can tag a thresher shark. Yeah, it's a very rare opportunity to be able to see a thresher shark. And yeah, it'll be really, really cool. Really cool. Yeah, and then we're also gonna have a whole bunch of workshops and experiences doing mangrove restoration alongside the the thresher shark champions that we have trained up. and you'll learn about the importance of mangrove ecosystems in tropical environments and the role that they play in maintaining reef health and as a nursery ground. And it's really cool to be able to go into the mangrove forest in a place like the Coral Triangle and just see baby versions of everything. I love it. Yeah. And then also there's seagrass workshops that we'll be getting you guys involved in. And in Etoile and the seagrass environments, there's a lot of dugongs, and a lot of them are really friendly also. So you'll probably have a chance to interact and snorkel and dive with dugongs, and you'll learn about why restoration of seagrass environments are critical for survival of species like the Indonesian dugong, and how we can get local villages and other communities involved in this type of community restoration work, ecological restoration. And then also the same with coral conservation. So there's just a huge variety of the type of experiences you get to take part in this experience that we're offering. Yeah, and also be a part of the community outreach with the schools and the children and everything. You don't need to speak Indonesian, don't worry. A lot of people speak English, a lot of people don't, but it's just, yeah, it's a really, really cool opportunity. And then since you are traveling to one of the most beautiful places in the entire world, you'll also have the opportunity to travel around some of the other islands and engage in some cultural experiences with like traditional villages and have meals with them and learn about their culture. And yeah, it's pretty incredible. Paradise, this place is definitely paradise. It's very hard to get to. I think you have to take about 4 flights from New Zealand, but it's definitely worth it. Like if it was easy to get to, it wouldn't be paradise. And this is just a snapshot of some of the days schedule. So you would do morning dives in the morning, and then we would have some workshops in the afternoon paired with some field activities and opportunities for you to take all the knowledge you've gained in our 3 workshops out into the field within the area of Etoile and get some experience, yeah, putting into action what you have learned. So there is a cost to this program. It is 2,300 New Zealand dollars, but this is covering all your accommodation for the whole 2 weeks, all your food for the 2 weeks, all the workshop materials, the marine park fees, the boat fees for diving, your gear rental, like literally everything. And the fee also contributes towards purchasing some satellite tags in which you guys will be using to tag the thresher sharks for the research. So it's all inclusive, well, $2,300 plus 10% tax. And it's an amazing opportunity for anyone interested in starting a career in marine and shark conservation and getting some real good hands-on experience in community-based conservation work. If you register for the program before the 24th of April, then with a friend, if you register with a friend before the 24th of April, then you can each get 10% off of the whole program. So yeah, we only have 6 spots. Oh, I think we have 5 or 4 spots available now. So if you are interested in joining this program, I'm pretty sure it happens during your university breaks, then please reach out and let me know and I can help organize everything. Indonesia is fully open to tourists, and so is New Zealand, thank God, after 2 years. So it's not an issue to travel there. You can just get a visa on arrival when you land into the country, and then we can help you sort out your flights and bookings. And once you land at the airport in Etoile, we'll pick you up and everything, we'll have control of everything and everything set up for you guys once we pick you up. So yeah, this is just pretty much what's included in the fees. You get all your accommodation, marine park fees, scuba diving, materials, and blah, blah, blah. just not included is flights, travel, dive insurance, and daily spending money. You won't need very much daily spending money at all. Most things are included, like food, and it's a very cheap part of the world. Yeah, and then this is just so we'll be staying, you guys will be staying at Air Dive, which is our partner dive shop in which we do all our dive research through. Super nice dive shop, very comfortable rooms, private bathroom, AC. They have this big outdoor pavilion area, which is where we'll be running our workshops. And the scuba diving in Etoile is out of this world. It's so good. Yes, that is a massive school of scalloped hammerhead sharks. The coral life is ridiculous. Also macro life, if you guys are dive nerds, like you can see ghost pipefish, a ridiculous amount of nudibranchs, frogfish, like 7 different species of frogfish. You have the mimic octopus, the wonderpus, like everything. It's incredible. So yeah, you'll have a lot of opportunity to scuba dive also. Yeah, so if anyone is interested in volunteering with us during this time, please reach out and let me know. And if you have any questions about anything, yeah, reach out and I will do my best to answer. That is all.
Awesome, cool. That sounds amazing. And we already have some interest I can see from the questions in the chat. So Abby has asked, what will the shark tagging be like? Do we get to do the tagging ourselves with the pole spears?
So you will be directly involved in the shark tagging with the capture of the sharks, and you'll be in the water when the tagging is happening. Obviously not everyone can do the tagging because one shark and one tag, but you will definitely have a critical role in the process. And there's a lot of, I mean, you have to watch in order to learn. So you'll spend a lot of time looking, but you'll be directly involved in learning everything and all the details and stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. Esther has asked, what prerequisites are needed? Do you need a dive ticket?
You don't officially need a dive ticket because all the research work that will be conducted is not on scuba, and the scuba diving that will happen is mostly just fun diving, but you'll get way more out of it if you do have a dive ticket.
Awesome. And finally, Tamsin asked, do you know approximately how much the flights cost?
I think you could fly to Bali via Singapore, Auckland, Singapore, Bali for less than $1,000 return now on Singapore Air, and then you have to fly from Bali to Kupang, which is in Timor, and then Timor to Etoile, and we'll pick you up from the airport. But domestic flights in Indonesia aren't very expensive at all. They'll probably be like $200 or $300. And the visa on arrival, I'm pretty sure, is $40 for a tourist visa.
Awesome, cool. And I had a quick question. The visa, is that for anyone or just New Zealand citizens? Say you were like a citizen of a different country.
Oh no, the visa is for anyone.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, unless you're from, I don't know, but Indonesia just released a new list of countries that they're offering visa on arrival from. So you're pretty good. You don't have to do quarantine anymore, and they just got rid of landing PCR tests as well. So it's, yeah, good time to go. It's also the best time of year to dive to Etoile, and it's also the worst time of year to be in New Zealand because it's the middle of winter.
That is definitely true. Awesome. Did anybody else have any more questions regarding the conservation volunteer opportunity or Etoile's talk? You can unmute, you can pop it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Looks like you have answered everyone's questions, which is super cool. I will just start wrapping it up then. Thank you so much, Etoile, for having this talk with us. It was amazing. I learned so much, and I'm sure everybody else did too. And I know we'll probably all be frantically researching flights to Indonesia soon. But yeah, so thanks a lot for holding the talk. Thanks Gemma and Tamsin again for organizing, and everyone who attended. It was super cool to virtually see you, kind of. Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to email me or reach out on Instagram or whatever. I'm happy to answer anything. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, cool. Have a great night, everyone.